Hi there, I'm Diane Deziel, and in today's video I want to present you the sewing machine foot that I'm using for my industrial sewing machine. The first one I want to talk about is the top stitch foot. So it comes in different sizes for different width of top stitch, and it comes for the left side and the right size. The one that I'm using the most is the 1/16 that I also use to do the understitch on the facing, for example, or under collar. So those foot, they have a step that allow you to do your seam or your top stitch very fast without almost looking, and it makes always straight line very easily. The second one I want to present you is the invisible zipper sewing foot. So it's usually have the two side, so you could sew both sides with the same foot. And if you didn't see me before, you might go look at some of my previous video, a few of them, where I show you how to sew your invisible zipper using that foot. But just as a reminder, I usually stitch the zipper in position before and then use my zipper foot after, and this way when you're sewing, it's pushing a little the zipper, but because you stitch it before, it's going to remain in place and stitch as close as possible from the teeth. So the third foot I want to talk about is the basic foot. For sure you do have this basic foot that goes with the sewing machine. Sometimes they're even on the front, sometimes they're uneven, but it's the basic foot. Beside that basic foot, there's other basic also, but a little bit different, that could be really useful. For example, I have this one. I call them the baby foot because it's the same thing but much smaller, allow you to go much closer to whatever you're sewing. And they're also shorter, so it allows you to go further in the corner. Of course, you do know the half foot for left side or right side that allow you to go the closest you could go to the thing you want to sew. But my two favorite one are those two baby foot that are double, just like the basic one. One is very, very tiny, and if you notice, the other one is a little wider. So I use them especially to do zippers. So the smallest one, I use it to sew my zipper. It gives you exactly the room that you need to move your carrier up and down, so it won't stuck into your seam. And the second one, a tiny little bit wider. Again, if you go right next to the teeth, gives you the tiny top stitch all the way parallel next to your zipper. The following foot is the Teflon foot that you could find in different colors, sometimes white, gray, or green. They all do pretty much the same thing. I like the tiniest one, so you could see the thickness here of the foot. This one is a little harder to control because it's thicker, because when you work on vinyl, leather, plastify fabric, you're going to need it. That's a must. And you could find, if you do a lot of project in those materials, you might find other kind of foot. The one I present today, the zipper foot, all kind of foot. This is the half foot in Teflon also. And just to show you what it does, the difference, I did sew here. There's two seams, looks quite the same here from the front. But I'll show you in the back what a normal foot did and what the Teflon foot did. So that's the major problem, why you would use the Teflon foot, to avoid that messy seam in the back. And now the next one is, I think, the most amazing one that I found. It's to do the stitch in the ditch seam, for example, for a cuff or a waistband. So stitch in the ditch is when you don't want no top stitch to appear. So the idea of a stitch in the ditch is to do your seam exactly over the first stitch and that the fabric of the waistband is covering it. So for this one, I'm going to show you on the machine what it does. I'm using a white thread over my very dark blue fabric. The next foot I want to show you is the gathering foot. So as you could see, there's a step, but the other way around. So it's horizontal if you want. And this allows the machine to do like a walking foot and create little pleats that are going to be gathered. The only thing is that you don't have a big control on how much it's going to gather. So you have to test, and depending on the thickness of the fabric and the stiffness, you're going to have more or less gather. So the following one looks more complicated, but in fact it's just a normal foot, just like the other one. It's to do gathers also, but using an elastic. So in that case, your fabric remains stretchy. You control how much gather you want by increasing or decreasing the screw on the foot. The good thing with that foot is that you could also sew little ribbon and have the seam or the stitch to hold it exactly at the same place, center all the time. Finally, a cord piping foot. It comes on left side or right side depending on your project, and it comes with different size of cord. The one I'm using most often is a 1/8 cord. So you use the foot to do the cord piping yourself. The foot allow you to stitch always at the same distance from the cord because of the fan that you see inside there, and it allow you to sew it also always parallel to your seam. The next one that I want to present you is not really a foot, it's more like an attachment, but you put it on the machine with just one screw like you would do for the foot. The foot remains the basic foot of your sewing machine, and these folder or attachment are used to roll twice your fabric. So for hemming, folding your fabric exactly the same amount the first time and the second time. Maybe different measurement, but always the same all the way to your seam. You could find them in different size of folding. Usually what's written on the folder, here I have 1/4 inch, that means finish. The final pleat is going to be 1/4 of an inch. So finally, the last one, it's an attachment also. It's to do the bias. So you might have seen my bias folder video before. Of course, these are the best, but this kind of folder, it's the second choice, but it does work pretty good also. So you could do a little cord bias, or you could put your bias around your garment just like that. So the stitch in the ditch, the centered one, you just install like any other foot. And this one I'm going to use it with the waistband, where you just overlock or bias one edge, and it's going to show inside, so not fold. So as you could see, it's all even, and usually you do your pressing after your seam, going to cover the seam that you just did. The second stitch in the ditch sewing foot model is the one that you could use for thicker fabric, and also when you fold the seam allowance inside. So I already press it, so this way I don't have to pin anything, and I'm sure it's going to cover the seam. So you just install it like any other foot. Stitch the same way we did for the other one. Make sure that the part that is lifting is the thicker side of your waistband. So just like that. So as you could see, you have your straight seam all the way parallel, and on this side even the white thread doesn't show unless you really pull on it. So after pressing, nothing will show, always straight, didn't catch the waistband. The following one is the gathering foot. So there's not much special on the foot, but I want to show you the difference between the cotton, organza, and heavy satin. So satin first. So as you could see, it's almost ease only because my fabric was pretty stiff and thick. The only little difference you could make is making smaller stitch or wider stitch. It could change a little bit the gather. Now I'm going to try with the organza. So organza was a little stiff also, but it's still giving me a lot more gathers than the satin. The following foot is the one that I use to do gathers with elastic or to sew ribbon on with always the same distance. So I'm going to start by showing you the ribbon. So when you do the ribbon, you do no tension at all. You just use this area to hold and distribute the ribbon really straight. As you could see, always straight in the middle, and you just have to concentrate on the width of the placement of your rib. So the other thing you could do with the same foot is use the elastic inside. So to do gathers, I suggest you put the elastic in before putting your foot on the sewing machine because it's a little hard to put it in. And also when you put it in, make sure that you release all tension. You'll screw it back after when you do your test because that's going to control how much gather you're going to have. Usually elastic will be in the back of the fabric. So you just make sure your elastic is straight in the back. And you just sew. You will see gathers that will appear. Et voila. First attachment I will show is the bias attachment. So look how easy it is to install. You put it with the tiny opening facing your foot. It's going to be the normal foot. So you place the opening right next to it, and I would say about 2-3 millimeter inside facing the center or the needle. And you're going to put the screw in the slit there in one of the 2 holes that you usually have on your industrial sewing machine. This is the only adjustment that you will have, that you could slide it one side or the other to control where your stitch is going to be. So to put it in, you're going to push it in, cut it in bias and push it inside. And using a pin, you're going to pull it out. I'm going to grab it and pull it towards the back. This time you have to help a little bit for the beginning of the fold. So you saw me pushing it back inside, and always do a little test before. So you could do the bias itself, or you could do your seam allowance by putting the fabric in between the 2 layers of fold, and I'm holding it a little higher like that, so both sides they fold exactly the same way. Et voila. So the last one is the roll twice or hem attachment. And you install it pretty much like the bias attachment. The small opening facing your normal foot, and the last fold here a little bit over the needle, and you're gonna screw it in one of the 2 holes that you have on your industrial sewing machine. One little advice: when you do use these folder, maybe it would be a good idea for you to do one normal plain seam before, so you have a little tail to hold it at the beginning, and it's going to help you to do, especially at the beginning, the first row. So I'm going to lift the foot and help, like I said, help the fabric to fold by pushing it and help. Believe me, it's just the beginning that needs that special attention.